My family actually held a formal vote at the dinner table to steal my $90,000 house down payment. They decided the money belonged to my sister, the same woman who dumped her twin toddlers on our parents for 3 years to travel the world with a guy she barely knew. Now they needed a flashy new condo, and my savings account was their designated funding source. I was 7 months pregnant, sitting across from them, listening to my parents justify taking my hard-earned money. I did not scream, I did not cry or beg them to be reasonable. I just took a sip of my decaf tea, looked my father dead in the eye and said, "Fine, you can have it on one condition." When I laid out that condition, every smug smile in that dining room completely vanished. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They entirely forgot who they were dealing with, and they had absolutely no idea I already owned the very house they were sitting in. Before I tell you exactly how I legally evicted my own parents and watched my sister lose everything, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to teach toxic family members a lesson they will never forget. Growing up in the Washington household meant living under the crushing weight of a carefully curated image. My parents, Marcus and Denise, were entirely obsessed with the concept of Black excellence. To the outside world specifically, their country club friends, and the congregation at our upscale church, we were the perfect, thriving family, living in a historic multi-million-dollar brownstone. But inside those expensive walls, love was strictly conditional, and the conditions were always rigged against me. I am Maya, 31 years old, and currently a director of data analytics. My husband Jamal is a highly successful wealth manager. By any normal metric, my parents should have been incredibly proud of the life we built together. But in my family, logic never applied to me. I was the dark-skinned, bookish daughter who preferred studying algorithms over attending social galas. My sister Nia, on the other hand, was 28, possessed our mother's lighter complexion, and had a natural talent for manipulating everyone in her orbit. Nia was the undisputed golden child. Her failures were always framed as temporary setbacks, while my successes were merely expected minimums. The most glaring example of this hypocrisy was Trey and Malik, who are Nia's twin toddlers. She had literally abandoned them with my parents for the past 3 years, so she could backpack across Europe and find herself. My parents raised those boys while praising Nia for her adventurous spirit, completely ignoring the massive financial and emotional burden she had placed on them. That Thanksgiving dinner was the perfect snapshot of our twisted family dynamic. Jamal and I arrived early to help, only to be banished from the kitchen so my mother could personally plate the appetizers for Nia's arrival. I was 7 months pregnant with our first child, my back aching and my feet swollen, but I stood silently by the dining room window while Jamal gently rubbed my shoulders. We watched Nia stroll through the front door an entire hour late, clinging tightly to the arm of her boyfriend Connor. Connor was a 30-year-old white guy who aggressively described himself as a cryptocurrency investment guru. In reality, he was a loud, unemployed grifter who used complex buzzwords to hide the fact that he was living entirely off whatever money Nia could squeeze out of our parents. The moment they walked in, the entire atmosphere of the house shifted to accommodate them. My mother rushed forward, practically pushing past my pregnant belly to embrace Nia, as if she had just returned from a grueling military deployment. My father, who had barely grunted a hello at Jamal earlier that afternoon, enthusiastically shook Connor's hand and immediately offered him a generous pour of his most expensive bourbon. Jamal and I took our seats at the far end of the long mahogany table, the unspoken designated zone for the supporting cast. Throughout the first course, the conversation was completely monopolized by Connor. Jamal, who actually managed multi-million-dollar portfolios for a living, tried to answer a question my father asked about the current housing market. Before Jamal could even finish his first sentence, Connor loudly cleared his throat and talked right over him. "Traditional markets are completely dead, man," Connor proclaimed, waving his fork dismissively in Jamal's direction. "You guys are playing a rigged game designed for the middle class. Nia and I just moved another 10 grand into this new alternative coin project. It is all about decentralized disruption. You just have to be smart enough to see the vision before the masses catch on." I felt Jamal tense beside me, but my husband maintained his flawless professional composure. He just took a calm sip of his water and let Connor ramble on. Nia leaned her head against Connor's shoulder, deliberately flashing her freshly manicured nails, and sighed dramatically. Connor is just so brilliant with this stuff, Nia cooed, looking at our parents for validation. We are building an absolute empire together. It is just so stressful right now because our current apartment is way too small for two ambitious entrepreneurs. We desperately need to upgrade to a luxury condo downtown, so Connor has a proper home office to manage his trades and monitor the global markets. My mother clapped her hands together, her eyes shining with absolute adoration. Oh, sweetheart, that is exactly what your father and I were discussing earlier today. You two deserve a space that reflects your massive potential. I kept my eyes focused on my plate, cutting my roasted turkey into small, precise squares. I knew exactly where this conversation was heading because I had spent my entire life paying for Nia's so-called potential. But even I could not have predicted the sheer breathtaking audacity of what my father was about to say next. My father cleared his throat loudly, tapping his silver fork against his crystal wine glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the low hum of the dining room, demanding absolute silence. He stood up at the head of the table, adjusting his tailored suit jacket, and beamed down at Nia and Connor with the kind of immense pride he usually reserved for his own reflection. Your mother and I have been talking. My father began, his baritone voice projecting as if he were addressing a crowded banquet hall instead of just the six of us. We look at you, Nia, and we see the future of this family. We see an ambitious young woman ready to take her rightful place in the world, alongside a partner who clearly understands how to generate real wealth. I felt Jamal stiffen slightly next to me. We both knew exactly what my father thought of real wealth. To him, it was all about flashy appearances, designer labels, and address codes. It had nothing to do with actual financial stability. We know that breaking into the luxury real estate market is crucial for your new business ventures. My father continued, smiling warmly at Connor. So Denise and I have decided to give you two an early wedding gift to secure that downtown condo. We are releasing the $90,000 from the family joint savings account to cover your down payment. The air in my lungs turned to ice. For a split second, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the hallway. I blinked, staring directly at my father, trying to comprehend the absolute insanity of his words. The family joint savings account was a complete fabrication. 4 years ago, my parents had tearfully convinced me to open a joint account under the guise of creating a unified family emergency fund. They claimed it was a cornerstone of building generational wealth, a safety net we would all contribute to. But over the past 4 years, I was the only one who ever made a single deposit. Every bonus I earned, every tax refund, every spare dollar I scraped together from my consulting side gigs went straight into that account. It was my money, 100% of it. My parents had not contributed a single dime, and Nia certainly had not either. Nia gasped dramatically, covering her mouth with her freshly manicured hands. Oh my God, Dad, Mom, are you serious? That is so incredibly generous. I cannot even believe it. Connor pumped his fist in the air, looking incredibly pleased with himself. That is what I am talking about. Generational wealth in action. You guys are not going to regret this. I will triple that equity in 6 months tops. My mother leaned over and patted Nia on the cheek. Her face stretched into a perfectly practiced, condescending smile. We just want to see you shine, sweetheart. It is your time. I placed my hands flat on the mahogany table. My voice was dangerously calm when I finally spoke. Excuse me, but you cannot give them that money. All eyes snapped to me. The triumphant smiles on my parents' faces melted into masks of instant irritation. What do you mean we cannot? Maya? My father demanded, his tone dropping an octave. It is family money. And as the head of this family, I am deciding how it is best utilized. It is not family money, Dad, I replied, keeping my tone perfectly even, despite the rage boiling in my veins. It is my money. I am the only one who has ever deposited a single cent into that account. Jamal and I have been saving that $90,000 for our own future. I am 7 months pregnant. I am not funding a luxury condo for Connor to play crypto trader in. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then my mother scoffed, waving her hand in my direction as if swatting away a pesky fly. Maya, please stop being so dramatic and selfish. You and Jamal both have excellent salaries. You are doing just fine. I am doing fine because I work 60 hours a week and save my money. I shot back, staring her down. And being pregnant is not cheap. We are preparing for a child. Nia let out a loud, dramatic sigh, her perfectly glossed lips forming a practiced pout. Why do you always have to do this, Maya? Why do you always have to make everything about you? I finally find a great guy, I finally have a chance to build a real future, and you just cannot stand to see me happy. You are always competing with me. I watched her blink rapidly, forcing fake tears into her eyes, while Connor wrapped a protective arm around her shoulder. My mother immediately reached out to comfort her, shooting me a glare so toxic it could have peeled the paint off the walls. Competing with you? I asked, my voice remaining remarkably steady. Nia, you abandoned your twins. Trey and Malik are upstairs in their bedroom right now being raised by our parents because you decided motherhood was too stressful. And now you expect me to hand over $90,000 of my own hard-earned savings so you can live in a downtown penthouse. Do not bring the boys into this, my mother snapped, slamming her hand on the table. Your sister went through a very difficult transitional phase and she is finally finding her footing. You should be lifting her up, not tearing her down. As a Black woman, you should understand the importance of community and lifting up your sisters. Connor decided this was the perfect moment to interject his unwarranted opinion. Look, Maya, I get it. You are hormonal. You are stressed about the baby. But holding on to capital in a stagnant savings account is basically throwing it away due to inflation. By letting us leverage this capital for real estate, you are technically helping the whole family portfolio. I turned my head slowly and looked Connor up and down. Do not ever speak to me about my hormones or my capital again. You do not know the first thing about finance, and you certainly do not know anything about my family. My father stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. That is enough, Maya. I will not have you disrespecting guests at my dinner table. You have always been stubborn and greedy. We fed you, we clothed you, we put you through school. And the one time your sister needs a legitimate boost to get her life on track, you clench your fists and refuse to help. You are going to be a mother soon. Maya, my mother chimed in, shaking her head with profound disappointment. What kind of example are you setting for your child? A family shares its resources. We are releasing those funds to Nia tomorrow morning. You need to learn how to sacrifice for the greater good. It is time you stopped being so incredibly self-centered. They sat there looking at me with absolute contempt. My own parents looking at me as if I were the villain for refusing to let them steal my life savings to fund my sister's delusions. They really believed they held all the power. They believed that because my name was tied to theirs on that joint account, they could just bulldoze right over me through sheer intimidation and family guilt. They thought I was just the quiet, bookish daughter who would eventually cave to keep the peace. They had absolutely no idea that I had stopped playing their game months ago. Connor leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table and steepled his fingers together. A condescending smirk spread across his face, highlighting the sheer arrogance of a man who had never worked a hard day in his life, but fully believed he was the smartest person in the room. He looked at me with an expression of faux pity, the kind of look a teacher gives a slow student who just cannot grasp a simple concept. Maya, you are letting your emotions cloud your financial judgment, Connor said, his voice dripping with unearned authority. You are looking at this from a mindset of scarcity. You see $90,000 and you think you need to hoard it in a low-yield savings account for diapers and baby furniture. But wealth preservation is about synergy. It is about understanding that when Nia and I secure this luxury asset, we elevate the entire family brand. When we win, you win. You need to stop being so greedy and look at the bigger picture. Family loyalty means investing in the players who are going to bring the highest return. Right now, Nia and I are the growth stock and you are just holding dead capital. I stared at him, listening to this unemployed grifter mangle basic financial concepts while actively trying to steal my life savings. He was lecturing a director of data analytics and a senior wealth manager about capital and synergy, while wearing a suit he had undoubtedly bought with my parents' credit card. Beside me, Jamal reached his absolute limit. I felt the heat radiating from my husband. Jamal was a man of immense patience, but watching a mediocre scam artist disrespect his pregnant wife in her childhood home was the line. Jamal shifted his weight, planting his feet firmly on the floor. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, a subtle but deliberate physical preparation for confrontation. He took a deep breath, ready to verbally dissect Connor, to expose his fraudulent crypto portfolio, and to remind my parents exactly who was actually funding their lifestyle. Jamal was prepared to burn the entire dinner to the ground to protect me. I dropped my hands to my lap. Underneath the table, hidden from the view of my gloating parents and my smirking sister, my hands curled into tight fists. My fingernails dug so deeply into my palms that they left sharp crescent moon indentations. The rage inside me was a living, breathing thing, demanding to be let out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the heavy mahogany table. I wanted to list every single sacrifice I had ever made for this ungrateful family and demand they beg for my forgiveness. But then I remembered the plan. I remembered the legal documents locked safely in the fireproof safe back at our house. I remembered the deed to this exact historic brownstone transferring into the name of the limited liability company that Jamal and I exclusively controlled. If Jamal tore into them right now, if I let my anger win and stormed out, they would never take the final bait. They would never sign the release forms. I needed their greed to blind them completely. I needed them to feel so powerful, so victorious, that they would not bother reading the fine print of the documents I was going to present to them tomorrow. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Underneath the table, I forced my fingers to uncurl. I stretched my hands flat, smoothing the fabric of my dress over my thighs. I reached over and placed my hand gently on Jamal's knee. He paused, turning his head to look at me. His eyes were blazing with protective fury, but when he met my gaze, I gave him a single, nearly imperceptible nod. I silently asked him to stand down. I communicated that I had this entirely under control. Jamal held my gaze for a heartbeat longer before slowly leaning back into his chair, his muscles remaining tense, but his silence secured. I reached for my teacup. The fine china clinked softly against the saucer as I lifted it. The entire table watched me. My father stood tall at the head of the table, his chest puffed out, waiting for my submission. My mother watched with hawk-like intensity, ready to strike if I uttered a single word of defiance. Nia had her chin resting on her hand, looking bored by the delay in getting her money. And Connor continued to wear that insufferable, knowing smirk, absolutely certain his ridiculous monologue about synergy had put me in my place. I brought the cup to my lips and took a slow, measured sip of my decaf tea. I swallowed. I set the cup back down on the saucer, making sure it did not make even the slightest sound. I picked up my linen napkin and delicately wiped the corners of my mouth, folding the fabric and placing it neatly beside my plate. I looked up, letting my eyes drift from Connor to Nia, then to my mother, and finally resting on my father. "Fine," I said. The word was quiet, but it carried through the room with absolute icy clarity. My father blinked, his thick eyebrows drawing together in momentary confusion. "What did you say?" "I said fine," I repeated, keeping my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "I am not going to fight you on this. You are the head of the family, Dad. If you and Mom believe that transferring my savings to Nia and Connor is the best financial move for the family legacy, then I will not stand in your way. Take the $90,000. The shift in the room's atmosphere was instantaneous and violently jarring. The heavy, suffocating tension evaporated, replaced by a sickening wave of collective triumph. They did not question my sudden surrender. They did not wonder why I went from fiercely defending my child's future to handing over my life savings in the span of 3 minutes. Their arrogance was so deeply ingrained that they genuinely believed they had simply worn me down. They believed their authority was absolute. My father let out a booming laugh of relief, clapping his hands together. "Now that is what I am talking about, Maya. I knew you would see reason once you calmed down. You have always been a smart girl. You know how to fall in line when it matters." My mother let out a long, dramatic sigh, pressing her hand to her chest, as if she had just survived a grueling ordeal. Oh, thank heaven. I was getting a terrible headache from all this unnecessary friction. "Maya, sweetheart, you are doing the right thing. You will see. When Naya is hosting us in her beautiful new downtown penthouse, you will realize how important it is to elevate your sister. This is what Black excellence looks like. We build each other up." Nia squealed with delight, throwing her arms around Connor's neck and planting a kiss on his cheek. We are getting the condo, babe. I need to call the realtor first thing in the morning and tell her we are wiring the down payment. We have to start looking at custom furniture immediately. Connor shot me a wink, pointing finger guns in my direction across the table. Good choice, Maya. Do not worry about a thing. I will send you guys a quarterly breakdown of the property appreciation. You will be thanking me when you see the return on investment metrics. I looked at them celebrating their theft. My mother was already discussing what kind of hors d'oeuvres they should serve at Nia's future housewarming party. My father was pouring another round of expensive bourbon to toast to Connor's negotiating skills. Nia was eagerly scrolling through her phone, probably adding luxury items to a virtual shopping cart. They were laughing, smiling, and toasting to their own brilliance. They looked so incredibly happy, so deeply satisfied with how easily they had stripped me of my resources to feed their endless vanity. They sat in my house drinking my father's bourbon, utterly oblivious to the storm that was gathering right above their heads. They had taken the bait without a single moment of hesitation. I watched their triumphant, oblivious smiles, and I smiled back. The clatter of expensive porcelain scraping against marble countertops filled the kitchen. I stood at the sink rinsing cranberry glaze off my mother's prized serving platters. The view over my shoulder captured the frantic energy buzzing just beneath my calm exterior, the room subtly shifting and trembling with my every breath. Jamal was still in the dining room, playing his part perfectly by nodding along to my father's endless cigar and scotch monologue, keeping the men distracted. My mother glided into the kitchen carrying an empty crystal wine decanter. She bumped her hip against mine, casually shoving me slightly to the left so she could access the dishwasher. She did not say excuse me. She never did. She placed the decanter on the rack and turned to me, a terrifyingly sweet smile plastered across her face. I am so incredibly proud of you, Maya, she said, her voice dripping with that sugary tone she reserved exclusively for when she got exactly what she wanted. You are finally learning how to be agreeable like your sister. It is so much more becoming on you than that stubborn defensive attitude you always carry around. I turned the faucet off. The sudden absence of running water made the kitchen feel suffocatingly quiet. I slowly turned my head to look at her, keeping my posture rigid. Agreeable like my sister, I repeated flatly. You mean compliant when it comes to funding her lifestyle? My mother rolled her eyes, letting out a sharp, exasperated breath. Do not ruin a good thing, Maya. Nia has a light about her. She draws people in. She knows how to navigate high society and build networks. You have always been so rigid, so painfully serious. It pushes people away. Rigid because I had to be the adult in this house since I was 18. I shot back, grabbing a dish towel and wiping my hands with deliberate, forceful motions. Do you remember my 18th birthday, Mom? Do you remember the prestigious art scholarship I won? The one I had to formally decline so I could work double shifts at the retail pharmacy. I gave up my dream school so I could help you quietly pay off Nia's $30,000 credit card debt before Dad found out and ruined his country club reputation. I was 18 years old, paying for her luxury handbags and spa weekends while she partied in Miami. My mother crossed her arms over her chest, her sweet facade dropping instantly into a scowl. That is ancient history, Maya. We are a family. We protect each other. Your sister made a youthful mistake and we handled it internally like a respectable family does. A youthful mistake, I scoffed, stepping closer to her. Is that what we are calling Trey and Malik now? Youthful mistakes. Because the last time I checked, those two boys are currently asleep in their bedroom upstairs. The same bedroom they have lived in for 3 straight years, while their mother backpacked across Europe and posted luxury bikini pictures from Dubai with a guy who does not even have a W-2 tax form. She abandoned her children, Mom. She dumped them on you and Dad so she could play pretend with Connor. She does not even know her own son's shoe sizes or that Malik is allergic to strawberries. She did not abandon them, my mother hissed, her voice dropping to a harsh, venomous whisper. She grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging painfully into my skin. She went through a transitional phase to find herself after a very dark period. Motherhood overwhelmed her, and she needed time to heal. And she is back now. She is building a proper home for them. She is building a home with my money, I fired back, refusing to break eye contact or pull my arm away. and she is only taking the boys back because the downtown condo requires a family image for Connor to pitch his crypto nonsense to your church friends. She is using those boys as props, and you are actively funding the production. You are just jealous, my mother sneered abruptly, releasing my arm and aggressively smoothing the front of her own silk blouse. You have always been desperately jealous of Nia. Just because you have your father's dark complexion and his heavy features does not mean you have to carry this bitter chip on your shoulder for the rest of your life. The words hung in the air, toxic and familiar. She was saying the quiet part out loud again. Nia takes after my side of the family, my mother continued, her chin raised in defiance. She has a certain elegance, a certain presentation that opens doors in our community. She has the right look. It is the reality of the world, Maya. People invest in people who look like Nia. You have to work twice as hard to get half as far, and that is just the unfortunate truth of society. But do not take your deep-seated insecurities out on your sister, just because she gets a little financial help to maintain the standard we expect from her. I stared at the woman who birthed me, listening to her openly weaponize my skin tone and my work ethic in the exact same breath. She was actively admitting that my darker skin meant I owed the family my relentless labor, while Nia's lighter skin meant she was inherently owed the fruits of that very same labor. My mother genuinely believed that because I did not fit her colorist standard of black excellence, my only valid contribution to the family was my wallet. For years, comments like that would have sent me spiraling into days of self-doubt and depression. I would have internalized the rejection, trying desperately to prove my worth through more achievements, more money, more sacrifices. But standing in that kitchen, with the physical weight of my pregnant belly grounding me to the floor, I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, calculating clarity. "You are right, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a soft, eerie whisper. "I have to work twice as hard. And because I worked twice as hard, I understand exactly how contracts work. I understand exactly how leverage works. I understand things that Nia and Connor could not even begin to comprehend." My mother looked at me, her brow furrowing in confusion. She was expecting me to cry, to argue, to storm out of the kitchen in a fit of emotional rage. She did not know how to process my sudden icy composure. "Just make sure Connor signs the bank release forms tomorrow morning," I said, turning my back on her and picking up another dirty plate from the counter. "I will not authorize the transfer of the $90,000 until every single piece of paperwork is legally binding. If you want the money for your golden child, you play by my rules." My mother huffed a dismissive breath, clearly deciding she had won the argument, and put me back in my designated place. "You always have to make things so needlessly complicated, Maya. Just send the paperwork to Jamal. Nia and Connor will sign whatever bureaucratic nonsense you need to feel important." She turned on her heel and marched out of the kitchen, heading back to the dining room to continue celebrating her monumental victory. I stood alone at the sink, watching the suds spiral down the drain. My hands were perfectly steady now. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a crystal-clear vision of the destruction I was about to unleash. They wanted to play a game of leverage and legacy. They wanted to strip me of my resources to fund a fantasy. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone, where the PDF of the liability release form was already waiting to be sent. They thought I was surrendering, but I was simply locking the door from the outside. The soft hum of my dual monitors was the only sound in my home office. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting long shadows across the sleek glass desk. This space was my command center, meticulously organized and entirely mine. The walls were painted a calming slate gray, a stark contrast to the stifling traditional decor of my parents' brownstone. On the left monitor complex, data visualizations mapped out market trends for my upcoming quarterly review. On the right, the final draft of the liability release contract was open, its dense legal jargon promising absolute freedom. I took a sip of my decaf tea, my eyes scanning the document one last time. Jamal had outdone himself. The language was precise, airtight, and utterly merciless, hidden beneath a veneer of amicable separation. It read like a standard agreement between estranged family members, designed to prevent future financial disputes. But buried within the clauses defining mutual separation of assets was the absolute surrender of any claim to corporate entities associated with my name. It was brilliant. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, resting my hand on my stomach. The baby kicked a sharp, reassuring flutter against my palm. "I am protecting our future little one," I whispered to the empty room. "No one is going to take what belongs to you." I turned my attention back to the screen and opened the secure portal for the family joint savings account. The balance sat there in bold black numbers, $90,000 exactly. For 4 years, I had treated this account like a sacred trust, sacrificing my own comforts to ensure my family had a safety net. Every deposit represented missed vacations, delayed renovations, and countless hours of overtime, and now they were treating it like a personal slush fund for Nia's reckless whims. I navigated to the transfer settings. The account was structured to require dual authorization for any withdrawal exceeding $10,000. My father, as the primary account holder, could initiate the transfer, but it would remain pending until I, the secondary holder, officially approved it. It was a failsafe I had insisted upon when establishing the account, a rare moment of foresight that was now proving invaluable. I accessed the Pending Transactions tab. Sure enough, there it was. A transfer request for the full $90,000 initiated just 20 minutes ago from my father's IP address. The destination was an external account registered under Connor's name at a shady offshore cryptocurrency exchange. They had not even waited for morning. They were trying to drain the funds while I slept, assuming my surrender at dinner meant I would simply rubber stamp the theft. I clicked on the transaction details. A small green button pulsed on the screen demanding my authorization. All I had to do was click approve, and the money would vanish, instantly transferred into Connor's unregulated wallet. I did not click approve. Instead, I navigated to the security settings and enabled a temporary hold on the transaction. A system-generated message popped up confirming that the transfer was now suspended, pending manual verification from all account holders. I added a custom note to the notification. Transfer requires in-person signature release due to liability protocols. Please contact secondary account holder to arrange a meeting. I hit save. The trap was set. The bait was dangling right in front of them, locked behind a digital glass wall. They could see the $90,000, they could almost touch it, but they could not access it until they played exactly by my rules. I closed the browser tab, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. I had anticipated their greed, knowing they would try to rush the transfer before I could change my mind. By freezing the funds, I was forcing them to come to me. I was forcing them to step out of their territory and into mine. They would have to leave the comfort of their brownstone, the illusion of their authority, and face me in my own domain, where I held all the leverage. I picked up my phone and drafted a carefully worded text message to the family group chat. I knew they would be awake, frantically refreshing their banking apps, wondering why the money had not cleared. "Good morning, everyone. I noticed the transfer request for the $90,000. As this is a significant withdrawal transferring out of a joint family asset into a non-family member's external account, the bank requires a formal liability release to process the transaction. I have had a standard document drawn up to protect everyone involved. Please come to my house tomorrow at 10 in the morning so we can finalize the paperwork and release the funds to Connor." I read the message twice, ensuring the tone was perfectly helpful and bureaucratic. It needed to sound like an annoying bank requirement, not a personal ultimatum. I hit send and set the phone face down on my desk. The response was almost immediate. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the glass surface. I did not pick it up. I knew exactly what the messages would say. There would be indignation from my father complaining about the inconvenience. There would be passive-aggressive sighs from my mother framing my caution as unnecessary drama. There would be frantic texts from Nia, worried that the delay might cost her the luxury condo. And there would be arrogant dismissals from Connor, insisting the paperwork was a waste of his valuable trading time. Let them panic. Let them sweat. Let them feel the precise anxiety they had so eagerly inflicted upon me. They wanted my life savings. They were going to have to work for it. They were going to have to look me in the eye and sign away their future for a handful of cash. I pushed my chair back and stood up, stretching my aching lower back. I walked over to the window and looked out at the quiet suburban street. The houses here were modern, solidly built, and occupied by families who respected boundaries and valued hard work. It was a stark contrast to the toxic environment I had escaped. I had built a life here, a sanctuary for myself, Jamal, and our unborn child. I was not going to let my parents or my sister infect this space with their entitlement. Tomorrow they would cross my threshold expecting to leave with a fortune. They would leave with their $90,000, but they would also leave their entire legacy behind. They just did not know it yet. Jamal walked into the office carrying 2 fresh mugs of tea. He set mine down gently near my keyboard, his eyes immediately catching the buzzing phone. "They are taking it well, I assume," he asked, a dry chuckle escaping his lips. I glanced at the screen where notifications were stacking up rapidly. "Oh, they are absolutely thrilled. My father just told me that standard banking procedures are a myth invented to slow down true innovators. Connor probably fed him that line." Jamal shook his head, picking up his own mug. He began pacing the length of the office, his sharp analytical mind shifting seamlessly into professional mode. His strides were measured confident, the pacing of a man who managed high-stakes negotiations daily. "Let us review the parameters one last time," Jamal said, gesturing with his free hand. "We need this airtight, Maya. If Marcus tries to challenge the Vanguard Holdings acquisition in court, after the fact, this document is our only shield. It has to be utterly flawless." I turned my chair to follow his movement. "I trust you, Jamal. You drafted it. Walk me through the kill shot." Jamal stopped pacing, turning to face me directly. His expression was dead serious, the easy humor replaced by the focused intensity of a wealth manager protecting his client's assets. "The core of the trap relies on the mutual release clause," he explained, setting his mug down on a side table. "In standard family financial disputes, establishing a clean break is notoriously difficult because courts tend to favor equitable distribution regardless of whose name is actually on the account. They look at intent." He resumed his pacing, his hands clasped behind his back. "Your parents intend to take this $90,000 as a gift. We are framing this contract as a formalized acknowledgement of that gift, but with a definitive finality. We are stipulating that this transfer represents the absolute conclusion of any and all financial obligations between Maya Washington and her immediate family members, including Marcus Denise and Nia Washington." I nodded, following his logic. "So by accepting the $90,000, they are agreeing that I owe them nothing else. Ever." "Exactly," Jamal said, pointing a finger at me for emphasis. "But that is just the defensive layer. The offensive layer, the kill shot as you call it, is buried in Section 4, Subsection B." He walked over to my desk and leaned over my shoulder, pointing to the specific paragraph on my monitor. "Read it aloud, Maya." I leaned in, my eyes scanning the dense legal text. "The receiving parties hereby waive release and forever discharge the providing party and any affiliated corporate entities, trusts, or limited liability companies in which the providing party holds a controlling interest from any future claims, demands, or equitable rights to property or assets." I stopped reading and looked up at Jamal. He was smiling, that brilliant, wicked smile again. "Any affiliated corporate entities." Jamal repeated, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Vanguard Holdings LLC is an affiliated corporate entity. When your parents sign this document to get their hands on Connor's crypto funding, they are legally signing away any right to challenge Vanguard Holdings' ownership of their brownstone. They are acknowledging that they have no equitable claim to the property. They are basically signing their own eviction notice," I said, the reality of the trap fully solidifying in my mind. "They are signing a waiver that prevents them from ever suing us when the eviction notice arrives," Jamal corrected. "They are willingly disarming themselves. If they take this to a judge claiming you tricked them out of their house, the judge will look at this document. The judge will see that they accepted $90,000 in liquid cash in exchange for relinquishing all future claims. It will look like a highly unconventional but completely legal buyout. They chose the cash. They forfeit the property." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long, slow breath. "It is ruthless, Jamal. It is survival." "Maya," he countered, his tone softening as he looked at me. "They were going to drain your savings to fund a scam artist. They mortgaged your childhood home to fund Nia's vacations. They have shown zero ruth when it comes to exploiting your hard work. We are just using the legal system to enforce the boundaries they refuse to respect." He walked over to the printer sitting on a small table in the corner of the office. He pressed the print command on his laptop. The machine whirred to life, pulling crisp white paper from the tray. I watched the pages slide out, each one carrying the weight of my family's impending downfall. The physical manifestation of their arrogance was printing right in front of me. "We need multiple copies," Jamal said, gathering the pages and tapping them neatly against the table. "One for them to sign, one for our records, and a spare just in case Connor decides to spill coffee on it in a fit of crypto-induced rage." I stood up, walking over to join him. I took the freshly printed contract from his hands, feeling the warmth of the paper. I flipped to the final page where the signature lines waited. 5 blank spaces. One for me, one for Jamal, one for my father, one for my mother, and one for Nia. Connor was intentionally excluded from the signature block. This was a family matter, and I wanted to make sure my parents understood they were legally responsible for taking the money, not him. I grabbed a blue ink pen from my desk and signed my name on the bottom line. I handed the pen to Jamal, and he quickly added his own signature. "The bait is set," I said, looking down at our completed signatures. "The $90,000 is sitting right there in the trap." Jamal took the document, placing it carefully into a sleek black leather folder. Tomorrow morning, they walk in, they sign the paper, we release the funds, and then we wait. We wait for Connor to do exactly what a grifter does. I finished the thought, turning to look out the window again. We wait for him to take the money and run. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained a heavy, bruised gray. Tomorrow would be the closing day. Tomorrow they would realize that the shelter they thought they controlled actually belonged to the daughter they had always despised. The $90,000 was the cheese in the mousetrap, and my family was about to snap its own neck, trying to take a bite. The morning light broke over the city, casting a sharp golden glow across my home office. I sat perfectly still in my ergonomic chair, a stark contrast to the frantic, chaotic energy I knew was currently vibrating through my parents' brownstone. My workspace was an oasis of absolute calm. My dual monitors hummed quietly, displaying the steady flow of global market data, while a single cup of chamomile tea steamed on the coaster beside my keyboard. I had deliberately muted my phone, placing it face up on the glass desk so I could watch the notifications pile up without letting the noise disrupt my peace. Miles away on the other side of town, Connor was already spending money he did not possess. Thanks to a fake social media account Jamal had created for monitoring purposes, I had a front row seat to Connor's morning performance. On my left monitor, I pulled up his public Instagram feed. He was broadcasting live to his modest following of fellow crypto bros and gullible aspiring entrepreneurs. He was standing in the showroom of a high-end European auto dealership, wearing designer sunglasses indoors and holding the camera at a high angle to capture the sleek lines of a charcoal gray sports car behind him. "We are making massive moves today," Connor bragged into the camera, his voice loud and obnoxiously confident. "Just securing some new assets. When you understand how to leverage decentralized liquidity, you do not have to wait for the traditional banking system to give you permission to live your best life. You just take control." Major capital deployment happening before lunch. Stay tuned to the channel to see how we disrupt the real estate market next. The camera panned slightly to reveal Nia standing nearby. She was holding an overpriced iced latte and aggressively flipping through a binder of premium fabric swatches. She was not even looking at the cars. She was already mentally decorating the downtown penthouse, operating under the absolute delusion that my life savings were successfully sitting in her boyfriend's digital wallet. She smiled for the camera, flashing a peace sign before complaining loudly to the car salesman about how long wire transfers take to clear in this archaic economy. I watched the salesman in the background of the video. His smile was strained, his posture stiff. He recognized a fraud when he saw one. He was politely but firmly asking Connor for proof of funds before tossing him the keys for a test drive. Connor waved him off with a practiced, arrogant flick of his wrist, promising the salesman that his private wealth manager was finalizing the transaction as they spoke. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. They had not even signed the liability release contract yet. They had not even bothered to show up at my house for the 10 o'clock meeting I had requested. They simply assumed that because my father commanded it, the universe would instantly bend to their will. My phone screen lit up brightly, shattering the quiet of my office. It was not a text message from Nia or an angry phone call from my father. It was an automated push notification from the secure banking app tied to the family joint savings account. The banner flashed in urgent red text. High-value wire transfer initiated. Immediate action required. I unlocked my phone and opened the banking portal, my eyes scanning the